Welcome to The Chaos Antidote, a leadership podcast hosted by Jason E. Neal, author of Accidentally Aligned: How Leaders Create Value in Chaos. Through these episodes, we will be exploring real-world problems and applying solutions that reduce your chaos and help you to become accidentally aligned. Hey everyone, Jason Neal, author of the book Accidentally Aligned: How Leaders Create Value in Chaos. Starting off with this again, if you haven't picked up your copy, pick it up. I have it on paperback, hard copy. It's Kindle, and now there's a new Audible version. So if you're in the shop or you're in your car, you can drive around and listen to it. It is a book about many of my life experiences, how I have used tools, techniques, methods to transform business, and a lot of lessons and a lot of failures in there that hopefully you can learn from without having to repeat. So today I want to talk a little bit about being the first, And I'll share this story. Shigeo Shingo shares it in his book, No Stock Production. And it's about Christopher Columbus. And he says, and the story is not validated, but it's one that he shares. It's one that's told about how some people were giving him a hard time at a banquet that was in his honor. And they said, if the world was round, eventually people would have figured out that there was a country there. It's not really like there was anything special. And they began to have this conversation, this dialogue. And he said, let's play a game. And he pulled out an egg and he said, let's put the egg on the table. And whoever can make this egg stand on its end, then I'll give some kind of reward to. And so all of the explorers that were giving him a hard time, looked at the egg and they tried it and tried it and tried it. And they couldn't get it to work. And then finally they just said, this is a fool's errand. This is not working. It's not possible. And they handed it back to him and he took the egg. It was hard boiled and he crushed it on the end and made it flat. And then he set it up. And they all said, but that's ridiculous. Anybody could do it if the end is smashed. And he said, yes, but somebody had to be first. And there's a huge lesson there. Like sometimes, when we bring a new idea into the world, or we say something that we believe is really true, or that hasn't been said before, or it speaks against the company culture, the organization's culture, or culture in general. And we say, hey, like maybe this is a good idea. Maybe we should think about this. It's not always received well, and there will always be people that criticize it. But as it starts to take hold, a lot of times people will get on board and they'll say, yeah, it's not that great of a thing. And maybe it's not in its entirety, right? But somebody has to be first. Somebody has to be the one to raise their voice and say, hey, there's a better way to do this. And now that's a positive version of being first, right? Putting new ideas out into the world and challenging thinking and trying to improve, life for other people. And that's very, very good. However, there's also another way that we can be first. You think about problem solving, right? We have all these problem solving tools and root cause corrective action. So in order to do root cause corrective action, I have to get to the source of the problem, right? Where not necessarily where I found it. Let's say I'm building an engine and I build that engine and I say on Friday, I can't ship this engine. I have 16 quality defects. Well, how do I know that? Because the inspector checked the engine and found 16 quality defects. But that's not where it happened, right? That's where I found it, but that's not where it happened. It probably happened somewhere very different, probably even in a different department, maybe in a different plant, maybe even in a different company, could even be a supplier. But we found it there. And then we try to back it up and say, well, where did it occur, right? Where's the point of cause for that? And when I think about this and problem solving, I was thinking about this the other day and it just kind of hit me. But the reason that we know that there are problems is because we have historical data. And when you think about this with a caused problem, not one that we've created, we're not going out and trying to be better. I'm talking about just normal operations. You're going through, you're supposed to ship 10 engines and you ship 8, right? And the standard's 10, you have a gap of 2, you shipped 8. And when I think about this and going through that, The reason that we know there's a gap is because we shipped 8, and somebody has to be first, right? You think about your safety metrics at work, wherever you work, and you go through the plant every day and they're like 0 defects, and I see this and it's awesome, and I'm glad that people have, 100% safety culture. But when it becomes a point of pride, it's dangerous because now the thing that we're doing well is having no injuries, right? And that is good. That's a reputable thing. We should be proud of that. But if that becomes the goal is to have 0 injuries, that can do one of 2 things. It can make us create a safer place, in which that would be a great thing. That would be a wonderful thing to benchmark. Or it can cause us to do very strange things like managers treating people for illness and injury in their office instead of sending them to the, yeah, the clinic, right? Why would we do that? Because now the metric of having the 0 injuries has become the thing, and we're serving it rather than it serving us. And then one day you're coming through the plant and you've brought through everybody and told them, yeah, we're a world record plant, and then somebody hurts themselves and we say, well, let's try to cover that up, and we can't, and so it gets out. Now here's the thing. That person was first. They were the first to challenge that broken system that we built. And maybe you haven't built that, good for you if you haven't, but this is hypothetical because I've seen this before, right? And whoever that first person is that says, I'm injured now and I need help, and not only do I need help, but I actually need you to figure out how I got injured, how this was able to happen, and to prevent this from happening again, because there's, my coworkers, there's people that I care about around me that I wouldn't want this to happen to. So we have this opportunity. We now have a first, and it's not the positive first that we talked about in the initial opening, right? This is a negative first. So we wanted something, it was really important to us, 0 defects, 0 injuries. And now guess what? We have a defect or we have an injury. And the way that we respond to that, why do you talk human factors? Why do you talk respect for people all the time? I really don't try to do that as much as it seems. I try to be balanced about it because the process is really important. I've seen places where people, have huge respect for people and they have no standards, and obviously that's not a good thing either. You know, you have to have the infrastructure in place to manage and to retain standards and to be able to recognize when something goes wrong. But on the same hand, if you have all those things and you don't respect your people, you're still going to have some major issues. So I do try to speak to both sides of that. So now here's what we're dealing with. We don't really have a process problem here. The processes are probably in place. We have standard work, in this fictional factory that I'm making up, and people are following it, but somebody got hurt. Maybe it was a metal burr. Maybe they were, moving a piece and didn't have their glove on, and maybe there's nothing in the planning that says to have your glove on. I don't know. But something went wrong, and now they have an injury. And now I can do one of 2 things. I can look at them as the enemy and say, here I had this world-class safety system and you've ruined it because maybe you didn't follow instructions, or maybe you didn't follow the standard, or maybe you did and we just didn't create a standard or a system that was strong enough for you to be safe in. Um, but the real question that we need to ask is, what went wrong? What broke? Why did the system allow this to happen? What about our process allowed this to happen? When you came into work and you felt like you didn't need to have your gloves on, and you grabbed a metal burr and it cut your hand, and now you've got 6 stitches, right? Why did you not understand the procedure? And right, the three root causes for problems are: standard does not exist, standard is not followed, or standard is not capable. I walk through this extensively in my book, right? These are the type 0, type 1, type 2 root cause. But these are the questions we need to start to ask. Well, no, I knew the standard was there. So why did you follow the standard? Most of the time I do, but not in this instance. Why? Well, I was under immense pressure, the production pressure, and we're trying to produce this. And I've been told this is very serious to the business. And in those moments, It's absolutely crucial, right? If we say, okay, yeah, that's good, but if we as leaders, and I say this quite a bit, leaders set the thermostat for any business. But if we as leaders are authorizing and saying, yeah, it's okay to bypass the standards under production pressure, that's not good. That is not good. If we bypass a quality system, if we bypass a safety system, that's terrible, right? Our goal is to get to the understanding, figure out where the gap is, and then we can put a corrective action around that and we can fix that gap so in the future it's better for everyone. Forget the number, right? I mean, yeah, you're going to get a if you're a leader and you have a major safety issue, you're going to get a black eye over that. Somebody's going to be upset over that, and rightly so. But that's not that's done. That's in the past. We're already past that. That's already happened. It's what we do going forward that makes a difference. It's how do we prevent this from happening the next time, right? And this is where we demonstrate respect for people. When I was 18 years old and I'm approaching 50 now, it's been a long, long time ago. And I worked for a very small machine shop, not even a name that anyone would recognize, just a little small machine shop, and we made plastic shifter knobs for automotive. So these are the shifter knobs that screw onto the shifter, and then you drive a manual shift with them. And we were working, and I had this big die press, and it would come down, and it had a drop button with my left hand, and I would remove the buttons with my right hand, and then I would hit with the left hand. I was making killer time. I was blowing way, way, way past the tack time of what was required, and making the business a lot of money. And, as I was going through this process, I had my hand waiting to drop the die and was removing the pieces, and my hand bumped the die, and it dropped on my hand, and it took the end of my finger off, and my fingerprint, my fingernail, and it was really hot. It just burnt everything off, and, I had to go to the hospital, and it hurt really, really bad, and, came back to work, and I started, going back to the press, and my manager was like, "Hey, yeah, come with me." I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure," and went with him, and they took me into HR, and HR said, "Yeah, we had a really good safety record prior to what happened the other day, and this just doesn't reflect the kind of safety that we want here, and so we're gonna have to let you go." And they fired me, right? And I was 18. I didn't understand anything about labor laws or anything. And so I said, okay. And this is the most bizarre thing. And now here I am, a lot older, and I think about this now. But it's so bizarre. And as I was leaving, they said, but before you leave, will you tell us something? And I said, sure. And they said, what could we do to make the process better and improve it? And I was I I don't work for you anymore, right? It's there are multitudes of things, and had you asked me, we wouldn't even be here, right? Because we should have had two buttons to drop a press. That way, you're sure that your hands are removed from the press. You can't have one in it while you're dropping the press, right? A second button. But the culture was such; it was a very small, family-run shop. The culture was such there wouldn't have been any investment in that anyway. Right. Well, why do I bring this up? Because it's because the way that we react to people when they're the first is really important. When we come down, if I say, hey, congratulations on running my safety metric, I'm probably not going to get my bonus now. You're done. I'll just tell you, they're not going to share anything. The other thing too is, there's legal questions, right? If somebody's hurt and they don't if we don't have established sense of trust with people, or they think we're out to get them, they're going to guard what they say. They're going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to share that information with you because I'm really concerned about what's going to happen here. And is my job safe? And because that's way more important to them in that moment than improving the process. Way more important. If they have a family at home, that's what's on their mind. Am I going to get fired for getting hurt? And so we have to build these structures, and where we have people who are the first. Congratulations, you made the defect, right? It was it was on your watch. Do we go after the people? We say, well, somebody's head's going to roll for this one, and certainly I've seen that. Or do we say we need to go down to the Gembo, we need to go to the place where the work is done, and we need to understand what went wrong? And this is what I did when I was a quality manager, for a very large engine program. And I would go down and I would walk with the people, and some of them were even mean. They were mad and they would, use bad language, at me and stuff because they felt threatened. I was in their space. And I said, "Show me what you do. Why do you do that?" And just ask a bunch of questions. Watch them. When I look at this screen and it's telling you to do that, and I see what you did, but that's not what you did. Why did you do it differently? Well, because that doesn't work. Wonderful. Standard not capable. Why is it? Why does it not work? Walk me through that. And this is what we'll find, because all that's variation. If you have someone and they're following a standard and then someone else says, "Well, I tried to follow a standard, it doesn't work, it works better this way," you now have variation. And the more that you have variation, you'll have that instability. And where you have that instability, when you standardize that instability, you hear me say this all the time, you'll standardize chaos. Your run chart will be all over the place because you can't control it. There's instability, there's variation. So where we go, look at these processes. That's what I recommend. Make a difference, right? I get a lot of questions like this, and folks will say, how do you handle this when you get in a situation and you know that it's going to cost you something, and how do you know they didn't do it on purpose? I don't. But my question is, even if they did it on purpose, let's say that somebody came into a corporation tomorrow and they stole $400 million, right? Yeah, okay, they did it on purpose. Fair. But why? Why were there not checks and balances? Why did $400 million, why was it able to leave the company without anybody noticing, right? There's still a massive, massive process failure there. And the more that we interrogate the process and we find it, we'll find the holes. The more that we pressure test it, the more that we squeeze it, the more that we speed it up, the more that we look for those failures, we'll find those holes. So what's my challenge? I always give a challenge every week when I go through these. What's my challenge? Look for the places this week where you have processes that aren't as robust as you'd like them to be. If you sent a well-trained person in there and they can do the job very well, um, over and over and over, that's wonderful. But what if you sent somebody that wasn't? What if you sent a newer hire? I don't want to say an inexperienced, completely inexperienced person, but let's just say you sent in there a person who wasn't as experienced with the job. How would they do? How would they do? What issues might they have? What questions might they have? And I'll tell you, one of the things I learned the most about is when we have a new worker and I show them the standard work and I show them the job, or I join a senior trainer that's training them, and just listen to their questions. Well, why? Why does the wire go there? Because in the picture it goes here. And I'm like, interesting. It does. Yeah, that's interesting. And I never would have saw it. Senior person never would have saw it. You know why? Because they've been doing it for 25 years. They don't even pay attention to that kind of stuff. But those are important things, right? Because that's your quality, right? That's your safety. So anyway, this is my challenge this week. Write it down. Go through your process where you see weaknesses, where you see things struggling. If you have an encounter, and hopefully you don't, if you have an encounter with someone that's bringing a first, whether it's a positive and they're saying, "Hey, I've got a new idea," um, check yourself on how we react to that. If you didn't react to it in the best possible way, write it down. Had a new hire or intern or seasoned employee approach me and say that this process was broken, probably didn't respond in the best possible way, and then begin to write out what was wrong about your response. You don't have to share this with anyone. Keep it to yourself. Probably didn't word my wording correctly. Great. What will you do next time? Probably wasn't open to the idea as well as I should have been. Wonderful. What will you do next time? Probably shot the idea down before I had a good chance to hear it. That's great. What will you do next time? And this is continuous improvement. This is how we continually improve. This is how processes and workplaces get better. This is how we build trust. This is how we build trust. This is how we build systems that work together. This is how we make tomorrow better than today. Pick up my book. Follow me on LinkedIn, YouTube. Really appreciate the views and the questions that I'm getting. I'll try to pepper those in here more as we go through. Have a great week.